Good evening, everyone. In this demonstration video, I'm going to uh, explain about the task given by my team leader, and I want to complete those tasks within this weekend. So, in this video, I'm going to explain about each task one by one and how I perform, how I implemented those tasks functionally and technically, and how I coded them. So basically, all the overview and all the tasks explanation I am going to give and explain in details with you. So uh, let me uh, show you the tasks. So here it is my tasks. There are total approx 14 tasks that is allotted to me to complete it, and I have successfully completed all the tasks. So so let me give you some overview about this. So what I'm going to implement and how I am going to implement those tasks and complete those tasks. So as we are working on a second microservice, that is the payment processing service, and in this service basically there are major two endpoints which is invoked by the first microservice, that is the payment validation service. So let me explain about the first endpoint. Why it is invoked and what is the responsibility of that endpoint, and what are the business logics each handles for each transaction. So uh, just like I'm going to overview about when the customer clicks on some payment to want to purchase some items or purchase some toys, so it simply clicks the providers button, like for example PayPal, Trustly, Stripe. So after that, each payment is should be validated, means each payment should be validated with some rules. So the validation service is responsible to validate those payment and check there should not be any breakage in the data integrity. So the genuine request comes and all the fields, all the request structure is proper. So uh, after that, it can be processed earlier to call our specific providers to make the payment and cut some amount and other processing works. So for that, after validating the request, like after validating the request by our validation service, the validation service after validating calls the our first endpoint. As I say before, there are two endpoints in our microservice. So it's just trigger our first endpoint, and after triggering the first endpoint by the validation service, the responsible of the uh, uh, first API uh, business logic is to uh, save the transaction with the incoming request into our database and make the status as created. As we have a special status management system in which we have the top five statuses, which indicates the current status of each payment, that is the created, initiated, pending, success, and failure. So for the first after the first API invocation, we just allot the request into our unique transaction reference, in which we take helps of the UUID universal identifier, something like that. So we just provide a unique transaction reference and save the payment into our database, or save the transaction into our database uh, in created state. Okay, so this is the main function of the first API. That is the create order. The endpoint is like a v1/payments. So after the payment is created, saved into database as a status created, now we just response back to the validation service with a unique transaction reference. Like here it is like this, the transaction reference. So we are response back with unique transaction reference as we following the REST standards. So the method is post. So we should have to return the unique ID, and that unique ID for us is the transaction reference. After the validation service got the unique transaction reference, then it is going to call our second endpoint with that transaction reference. Let me show you our controller. Like here it is our payment controller. Okay, this is the first endpoint, post mapping create. This is the first endpoint, and we just created a response back as the response back with the unique transaction reference. Okay, so second one is the second, this is the second URI of our second URI of our endpoint. So in this, the the main logic means in after when the validation service calls our second endpoints, means it wants us to make a proper process in this payment. Like we should have to call the specific provider which mentioned in the request structure, and got the and we should have to got the response, proper success response from the from our provider. Anyone can be that, and just return back the URL, the redirect URL, so that the customer enters their credentials and approve the payment, and enter some amounts to after that the money will be deducted. So the main logic we should have to return here. So let me overview about this second endpoint. So in after triggering this endpoint, we should have to merge both the okay. So let me clear one more thing. We have some request structure with this transaction. Let me F3. Okay, wait. Okay, so this is our first request structure, in which we have some 6 to 7 fields like payment method, provider, type, account, currency, transaction status, and merchant transaction reference. Okay, so we have to the in the first API, when validation service calls us the first API, that is the create API. So we got these request structure from the validation service. So we have to save this. As I said before, we save this as a, and the status as created, and with unique transaction reference. Our main our main request structure would look like this. This is the main request structure. So we want to have some these fields. We want to have these fields to process, along with some more fields that is provided in by the second API invocation, the request structure of the second API when the validation service calls us. So for that we have this request structure. So the task is to initiate the payment. Means after validation service triggers are the second API, we have to merge these request structure as it is given by the second API invocation only. This is the second API invocation request structure, and we have to merge it with this request structure which we got earlier and saved into database. Okay, so this is our second, and we have to merge these both requests into a single like this, and we have to add some more fields like here. Some fields are not present, like name, first name, last name, and locally return URL, cancel URL. So we have to consider that, and for that I'm going to explain you after some times. Okay, so main task is to just I give you the overview that just we have to merge both requests. For that we have to fetch the firstly we have to fetch the data which is saved in DB while we are inserting creating the payment. So we have to fetch. Then after that we have to merge these both requests into a single object, so that we call our specific provider. Before that we have to mark its status as initiated. So this is our main this is our first task, not a first task, like major tasks. So we have to make the status as initiated. Then after the return URL success URL came back, then we have to mark that status as pending for particular transaction. Okay, so this is like our overview. So for that I just explain you the I just explain you the functional part. Now I'm going to show you technically how I implement that. So here it is our controller. So let me take you by one. Okay. So these are first tasks, not these are tasks. Some Okay, this is the first task to cut down the request structure. Means I am able to cut it like this. This is our first. It is earlier this request structure earlier like the transaction DTO. So we have cut down some fields which is not sended by the validation service. So we have to cut those requests like the present here. Earlier the transaction reference is present, but the transaction reference is generated by our service. So it is not required. Of course it is not required to want it in our request structure from validation service. Okay, like that. Okay, so I'm going to give you the overview. I simply not going to one by one each task. Firstly, I'm going to explain you. Then I will show you how I completed that. So for that, let's start from the controller. Okay. So as the first part is done earlier, the main focus is to are the initiate second API. Second API means the second endpoint in which we are going to initiate the payment and run some business logic into it to actually call the provider. So the first part means the creation part of the payment is already done and we have completed successfully. Now I'm going to explain about the initiated part. Let me give you line by line explanation. Like firstly, this is our the transaction reference which we have written in the first API call to the validation service, and it is returns back as a unique transaction reference because it is also a post mapping. So we got some here we got some request structure also. Like this is our request structure. It is a DTO, means we have its POJO corresponding POJO also. So this is our request structure which is sent by validation service in our second API call. Okay, or initiate API, I call it the initiate API. Okay, for better understanding. Now I simply calculated the standard protocol, means convert the PUJO into DTO. So simply here in this line I have converted. Now I'm going to call the our payment service. So let go into our payment service, payment initialization. This is my method. Now here I am going to explain you that I remove all the physical, all the status handler logic into a status handler package or payment status handler class, payment status service class, and all the rest of the things, it is under these status handler, payment status handler is under payment service. So let me call the payment service like that, payment initialization. So okay, so let's go into this payment initialization method, which handles all the business logic under that. So let's F3 go into this service method. 3, okay. It is an interface, so we have to go to the child. Control H, Control Alt H. Sorry, Control T. Okay, so payment service IMPL. Here it is the payment service IMPL. This is the logic of the first creation, payment creation. So we have to go through it. The main purpose of to understand about the payment initialization. So in this, I will explain you what I have done. Simply log the structure, DTO and the transaction. Now, as I say before, we firstly have to load the transaction. Means those transaction which we have saved in the first API, which is the create API, when the validation calls our first API. So the request structure we got from the validation service from the first API invocation, we have saved it in our database. So now to initiate the payment, we have to combine the current request structure which we got in the second API and the with the first API request structure. So we have to load the transaction. So for that, it is simple. Just pass the transaction reference that is unique, which we have saved it in the database um, uh, while saving the transaction as created. So we just load the database. Here it is the line of loading the database. We are going to this load transaction also. Let go through it. So F3, it is also to control T, payment MPL. Okay, so here it is the load transaction. So it simply loads the database. Okay, so main task is, here it is. Now we are loading the transaction. Select start from our payments, that is our database. This is our table where transaction reference is something. So now it returns us as the, as you see, it returns us as the transaction entity, but we want as transaction DTO because all the further business logic we have handled across the service layer as the object, as we should have the object as transaction DTO. Nothing uh, nothing another than that. So here we have to convert the transaction entity into the transaction DTO. Now I am going to show you what is the difference between transaction entity and transaction DTO. Let me close this. We can open it again. Okay, okay, this payment status. Let me close this DAO also. So let's go under this transaction DTO and entity. So this is the main difference. Uh, Here it is these three: payment method, provider, and type, and the last one is the status as a string. But in entity, it is as a integer because because as our transaction table we have some foreign keys, and basically these are the foreign keys, all these like 3 and the 4 fields which are defined here, these are the foreign fields of the transaction table. So for the better like I can say that the For easiness, we have and the standard, following the standard protocols, we have these as id, means in database it is stored as id, and we just have to convert this into corresponding string. So earlier, while we are creating the transaction and saved it in our database, we just simply convert the upcoming string from the incoming request into the integer, corresponding integer before saving it to database. Means earlier we converted the transaction dto into transaction entity. How? By using some enums. We have customized our model mapper. We have customized our model mapper, and we have wrote some converters from in string to integer. Now in this scenario, we have to convert the incoming transaction entity which we loaded from the database into the transaction DTO. For that, we simply return some extra converters. Like I can show you what is the difference. Like provider, so it converts the provider enum ID into name, and the second one is the provider into name into ID. As we write all the for fors, there are this is our total 8 converters, which is under the util package. So with the help of that, mm, we converted the string to integer and vice versa. And here it is the logic of model mapper. We have customized the model mapper in our configuration class and override two times, for first for the integer string to integer, and second for the integer to string. Okay, so this is our the conversion, which is very important to convert the transaction DTO into transaction entity and vice versa. And here I wrote some also handle some error if there is no if uh, there is no transaction reference, so it gives us the error. So I handle it, and I provide is no record found. Here it is some error code enums I have defined, like payment creation denied, no record found, payment updation denied, payment already completed, log not inserted. These are some error code and error message I have defined by myself to handle all the errors. And this is okay. So let go back. So I have loaded the transaction, okay, properly. Now the second, I have loaded the transaction. Now the second task is to make as initiated. Means we are up to call the provider, specific provider, which is a to do task. In upcoming days, um, uh, we complete this code after some meetings. So now for till now we have to make as initiated. Means we are going to we are payment is already initiated, means we are going to call the specific provider. So we have to save it as initiated and just call it. And here it is, right? I have already written some to do's, and basically I have written the temporary transaction DTO to for the testing purpose only. So let's go to through this initiate payment. It is very important, and majorly task is given under that. I have firstly understand you function and technically, then it is easy to relate with the task. What is the task and how I completed that. Now just go through under this. I already said it is under payment status service, means I have to update some statuses. For that, for easiness, for standardization, we have defined the payment status service, which handles all the status. Basically we have 5: created, initiated, pending, success, and failure. So all the business logic for updating the transaction is under this. Now let's go under this method initiate payment. So as you can see that it is an interface, and I have written the 5 for create, initiate, pending, success, and failed. I have written the 5 methods that handles the status separately. Let's go to under its implementation. Okay, this is the logic. I have already 5 methods. Let's it is only some all the same. Just here and there is some changes for finding the handlers. So let's go through by the, for example, let's go through this initiate payment method. So it receives as the DTO, means the structure which we got after fetching details from the load transaction, means loading the data from the database, and we got the as we got the transaction DTO object, fully transaction DTO object. We just print it now. Set status. So it is a initiate payment where then we have to initiate the payment. So for that we have to set the transaction DTO, set transaction status as initiated. Before that it is pending. So sorry, pending, no, it is created. Now I want to make it as initiated. So no, so for that, not hard coded here, we just use enums. That is the enums I have defined, like created, and this is the corresponding IDs. Like this is very important for dealing with the database. Like as in database it is saved like not created, it is saved as a 123 as a numeric value. Okay, so easy, for easiness we use the transaction status enum, and we just set this. Now after setting, we have written the logic like that. According to the status in the transaction DTO, we can fetch the perfect status handler. Means the status handler, that is a separate class which deals with the database directly. So not merging for status updation into a same class and make the code complex. For that we have written the 5 status handler. So for getting the 5 status handler, it is implementing one transaction status handler interface, and by uh, by by using the dependency lookup logic, helps of the dependency lookup, we fetched the corresponding status handler from the status transaction status factory. Let's go under this and we can simplify. Here it is, we have just setted, and it gives us that transaction status handler, corresponding transaction status handler. So let's go under this like this. Okay, so for that it is only accepted the enums in the parameters, and if the it is created, so we just return the created status handler. If initiated, return the bean of the initiated, and like this for pending, success, and failed. Okay, so this is the logic of the status factory. Let's go back, and we call like the getting the status, and just call as the converting the status into enum and pass it to the status factory. Now we got the status handler. Now let's go to this. It is invoked by the initiated status handler. Let's F3. As I say before, it implements one method, that all the status handler has the one method. Let me go to its implementations. Okay, F3, Control T. These are the implementation classes. So here it is the initiated. Let's go to this, and here it is the simple logic I have written to load the transaction. No, this is the another functionality. This and below this, these are the two external functionalities and uh, extra tasks. The main task is like that. It's just return the boolean update the transaction, means we have just updated the transaction into database. For that, let's go under this. control T, and here it is the update transaction where it is. Okay, here it is the update transaction. In this we just set the DTO object into the fields of the database and simply implement it, update it, and if some error comes we just handle it by our custom controller advice, that is the processing exception, and give some error code and error message. For the centralized error handling, standard error handling, let's go back. Okay, we are here again. Let me go through this. Okay, so here it is the logic of the status handler, and just return the boolean if it is updated, so true, otherwise it's false. So this is the logic of the initiate status handler. Now let go back to our payment service. Okay, so this is the main thing. All the logic, rest of the logic is pending to call the specific provider. So we have to make some external API request. So we have to take the use of the REST templates and make HTTP request, prepare some request structure, headers and methods, HTTP methods for that, and just call the API, call of the specific provider API. Okay, now I'm going to show you about the tasks. Okay, as I explained as I till explained you the functionality, I have majorly covered those tasks. I'm going to simply explain. As I said before, I just cut down the request structure. So this did the difference between the current request structure of first API invocation, in a difference between the first API invocation request structure and transaction DTO. So we have cut down some fields like the reference and the provider message and provider code. So I have cut it. So this is the modification I have done. Response structure we have clarify as this. Let me explain you about that also. Response structure. Okay, so as we know that for the first invocation we are following the REST standard, so we have to return the unique transaction reference, that is the transaction reference. What status is updated, we have to return this also, and the redirect URL. It is not that important in the first API invocation, it is important for the initiate payment, that is the second one. When we call the provider, it should give us the return URL, so we have to store in this. So for the standard response structure, we have take common for both first and second API invocation. Okay, for both responses to make it standardized. Now let me give you about the third. Okay, third is completed. The fourth one, Pojo to DTO, that I have initiate payment logic. Okay, that is this. I have already told you this. This is the payment initiate payment request, and for that we have we have created its corresponding class also. Now load the transaction from DD database. I have already explained to you. Map entity to DTO. I have also new converters configures. I have also explained you how, by making some extra converters and modify the custom model mapper. Okay, the sixth one is to create status and initiated. I have created all the files in created, initiated, and another three one. But to enums the switch case, I have tell you that the basically we have just passed the transaction status enum, and from that it created its returns the corresponding status handlers. Now write the code of standard initiated status handler. I have done it also. I have explained it to you. It just called the update transaction method, and two business logic is written in each initiated handler, which is the upcoming task. So This is the separate topic, so I have to explain it in another video. That is these two, 13 and 14. I am going to explain it in the next video. Let me, okay, where I am, okay, this one. Initiated, I have done it. Business logic, load DT done, mark transaction initiated done. This is the next in the upcoming meetings we have to finalize this code also, so it is quite pending. It is not the task, it is written like just written as to what we have to done in future. Now the ninth one, creating pending status handler done, creating failed status handler done, creating success status handler done. As I show you, I have created all the ones. These are the all the 5 status handlers I have created, coded, tested. Mm, okay, so complete the code of payment service MPL. Okay, done. Now transaction logic, these 13 and 14 I have to I'm going to explain the next video. So for that, let's uh, ends this video with a testing. Means I'm going to test this code, that is it is working fine or not. So let me start the service. Let's close all and let me start this service. So I am going to create live. I am going to create one payment. It should be written first API invocation, means as a validation. I want to create one payment with a unique ID. Then I expect that the first API, after the first API response, I have to get the unique transaction reference. That is the UUID code, which is unit, and I'm going to cross check in the database also. In the second transaction, in the second API invocation, I want to update the created status as pending. So these are the main two testings. Update into pending. So it is quite now only that much. For this testing, we are not going to call our specific providers because that code is not completed yet. So let me just call this, okay, create payment. This is the create payment VI payments, and I'm going to fire this API now. Let me clear this for easy understanding of the logs. Okay, let me make it as 121. Okay, and all this time let me cross check with the database, refresh. So here it is no ID till now. There is two rows only there with 101 ID and 102. So when we have to call, when we just fire, I expect that it should have the 3 rows now. After firing this, let's shoot. Okay, we got the unique transaction reference. It is the transaction reference. Current status is null and no direct URL because it is simply for the creation purpose. So we uh, we should not got some redirect URL, of course. So let's check with the database. 101, 10121, and this is bar. These are the unique transaction reference. It is quite some 36 bit or 50. I don't know that. This is the unique, universal unique. Okay. So what is this status? Now I'm going to call the second API and it should become the one. One means what? Let me show you. One means what? Where it is? Payments, tables, and status. Okay. So okay, let me close this. One means one means created, 2 means initiated, 3 means pending, 4th approved, 5th success, and the 6th is failed. So after calling the second API for initiate payment, I should get the status updated status as initiated, which is basically 2. So I expect this. It became 2. Here it became 2. Let me, okay, these are the some logs which we can understand. There are some details. I'm not going to go through in these details because it is quite fine, working fine. Here it is the proof. Now I'm going to call this. Let me take this ID, copy, let me save this. Let's call the second endpoint, which is basically this one. Okay, no, not like that. Okay, paste, save. Now, as I fire this endpoint, it should be make this as 2, means initiated. Let's go. We got the transaction status as initiated. Let's check with the database. It is become 2, means we have successfully initiated it also. Okay, all right. Now for these two measures, 13 and 14, I'm going to make the second video right after this. So I'm going to explain about these tools also in the next video. For till now, that's it. Thank you so much.